abstain. What do you need? What do you need? Oh, I have a few.
It's a school board. I still need a pen.
Right. I always have a few.
Oh, I got a drawer full.
Yeah. But I mean, I always have a few on me.
Yeah. Back up.
Okay, because now we'll be
Yeah, we should take. This part is started.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Mrs. Walker, since you're up, would you lead us in the flag salute?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sunshine Law statement, all requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act have been met for this meeting of the Board of Education of the Borough of Oradell. Notice of this meeting was filed with the record in Town News and all persons requesting such notice. Mr. Walsh, would you read the mission statement?
The Oradell Public School is dedicated to the ongoing pursuit of educational excellence through comprehensive, innovative curriculum and instruction. The district is committed to providing opportunities for social, emotional, and academic discovery to foster curiosity, courage, and character. Our goal is to prepare our students to become lifelong learners who are self-directed, resilient, productive, and responsible citizens.
Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Griffin? Here. Mrs. Levy?
here.
Mrs. Norton?
Here.
Ms. Shapiro?
Here.
Mrs. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes, here.
Dr. Wesley? Mr. Darian?
Here.
President Nichols?
Here, open to the public for agenda items only. Okay, moving on, I think we will move to the superintendent's report for our testing presentation.
I have extra copies if anybody would like one. Does everybody else have theirs? Or would you like it? Just hand that to Dr. Wesley. Okay, so I'm going to go through some of this fairly quickly because there's a lot of information. And then I'm also going to invite Ms. Bozios to come up at the end to talk a little bit about what some of this data means. And then we'll open it up for questions. So to begin with, on what's labeled page 2, we're starting with English Language Arts. And to begin with, what I'm showing you here is achievement. This is by grade level, so it's different students. And I'm focusing right now on the last two columns to the right, where it says meeting and exceeding the highest two levels, and then the last one over says not meeting and partially meeting. So in this past year, grade 3 had a 1% increase in the number of those who were meeting and exceeding. So that's a positive trend, which is the reason why it's highlighted in green. And then third grade for this past year had a 1% increase in those who were not meeting and partially meeting, and that's a negative trend, so that's why that's highlighted in red. Some other points, grade 4 this past year had a 9% increase in those who were meeting and exceeding. They stayed flat at 0. in the not meeting category. Another notable increase was for sixth grade, who had a 13% increase and also stayed flat for not meeting. And then I also wanted to point out to you that in all grades for this past year, there was a overall growth of 5% in meeting and exceeding. There was also a 2% negative increase in not meeting and partially meeting. Now, if you go on to page 3, this is the same information just shown to you in a different format, but it gives you an opportunity to see visually some of what I was just saying. So obviously for meeting and exceeding, we want the bars to be higher. And then if you look at page 4, that's that last column of those who are not meeting or partially meeting. So again, obviously, we want those bars to be as low as possible. This shows you some of the trends over the past several years. So now, on page 5, the state does their comparison by 3-year increments. Linkit does more, but in order for me to be able to compare our growth over time with the state growth, I had to keep it to just 2017, 2018, and 2019. So this page is showing you the percentage of change over time. And so on, one more. Okay, so if you look at levels 1 and 2 for the district, we had a increase of 7%, and since that's a negative trend, it's shown in red. And then 4th grade stayed flat. 5th grade had a 6% increase, which was also a negative trend. 6th grade stayed flat at 0. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, those students who were in levels 4 and 5, we had an increase of 1% in 3rd grade, 9% over 3 years for 4th grade. There was a 3% decrease for 5th, and that's 13% increase for 6th grade over 3 years. Now I'm on page 6, and again, I'm looking at those last 2 columns on the right. So overall, growth for meeting and exceeding over time. This is now what we're looking at is the same students over the passage of several years. And so if you look, there were significant increases all the way down the line in the meeting and exceeding category. And then if you look at all grades from 2018, 2019, there was a 8% increase. There was also over in that last column for not meeting and partially meeting, there was 1% increase, which was a negative trend. And so now page 7 is showing you that same data again, but visually. So you're looking to see those bars going up, and in this case they do. And then on page 8, we said we were looking for them to get smaller, and there's a little bit of fluctuation. They're not quite as small as we would like. Now, this next page, page 9, is showing you sub-scores for achievement. And I just want to point out that in Linkit, this data is for grades 3 through 5, and we'll look at 6th grade separately. But reading scale score for all grades, so that's about 2/3 of the way down. And I'm on the far right. We had an average scaled score in language arts of 61 and a writing scale score of 42. So now that's broken out into the different subsets. So we have literary text, informational text, vocabulary, and in writing, you have subscores for expression and conventions. So we had, over time, very slight decrease from last year in informational texts. We had a very slight increase from last year and the past years, actually, in writing conventions. So that gives the leadership team the opportunity to begin to target specific areas that we might want to address in our curriculum. And then if you look at the next page, that's page 10, I'm showing you the same information for grade 6. And the reading scale score was 61. The writing scale score was 43. Literary text was a very good increase, as was vocabulary, as was writing convention. So 6th grade did very well in these subscores. Okay, so now we're going to look at math scores. So again, if you look now at page 11, the last two columns, so you can see that 3rd grade this past year had a 3% increase, and in the not meeting and partially meeting stayed flat. 4th grade had a 3% increase and a 3% decrease in the two lower levels, which is a positive trend. 5th grade had a 4% increase and a 2% decrease, which was positive. 6th grade had a 2% increase and a 1% decrease. And then if you look at all grades from last year, again, 3% increase, and in the lower sections, they had a 2% decrease. So now, page 12, you're seeing that same information displayed visually, and you're looking to see those go up. And on the next page, as I said before, you're looking for these to be going down, and in just about every case they are. Grade 3 stayed flat. Now, the next page is the state comparison over 3 years in math. So for levels 1 and 2, we stayed flat. In grade 3, we had a 3% decrease, which was positive. Grade 5 had a 3% decrease, and grade 6 had a 1% decrease. And then over on the other end, where we're looking for increases, again, those were all positive. So we had a 3% increase over 3 years for 3rd grade, 3% increase for 4th grade, 4% increase for 5th grade, and a 2% increase for 6th grade. Then the next page, this is 15. These are same students in consecutive grades. And so I'm just looking at all grades right now in those last two columns. So we had 1% increase in meeting and exceeding, 2% decrease in not meeting and partially meeting. And then page 16 shows you that data visually, and page 17 is where you're looking for there to be lower numbers. And then I also gave you on page 18 the sub-scores for achievement. So this is same grade, but different students. And I'll just draw your attention to where, and I'm sorry, remember this is grades 3 through 5 again. So I'm looking at where it says all grades, but that's 3, 4, and 5. You can see there's some notable increases in modeling and application. Went from 70% last year to 78% this year. And another increase was in expressing mathematical reasoning. They went from 70 to 74. And then the next page shows you the same information for 6th grade. And you can see that they had notable increases in several areas. For instance, additional and supporting content went from 65 to 76, and modeling and application went from 51 to 66%. Now, the other way that we can look at some of this is by, by program. So now I'm on page 20, and we've broken out our disaggregated groups either by section 504, limited English proficiency, special education, or gen ed. And as you look at these different graphs, you can see that two that I thought were particularly significant is there was really good growth by our limited English proficient population, who went from 76% in meeting and exceeding up to 80% last year in language arts. And then look at the tremendous growth for special education, who went from 50% to 62%, which I thought was really impressive. And then, oops, I'm sorry, I'm off one of my slides here. Okay, so now, math, there we go. Again, the special ed population jumped from 38% to 46%, which I thought was really significant and impressive growth for that particular group. And then I also gave you another one that was a standout because I thought it was really interesting when we looked at these by gender. Our females stayed relatively flat. They only fluctuated by a single percentage. But look at how well the boys did, who went from 73% last year all the way up to 84%. This was language arts. And then in mathematics, same thing. The girls went up by 2% and the boys went up by 4%, which I just thought was a very interesting thing to note. So, as I said, that's a lot of data. And so in order to try to make sense of it and what we're doing with it, I wanted to invite our principal to talk about the next couple of pages so that she can put some of this into context for you.
Could you turn the slide, please?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so when I look at data, there's two things that I'm always looking at. Yes, I'm looking at the quantitative and looking for where are the trends in growth, but I'm also looking for what's the story behind it, and is it just luck, or is it a trend? Is there something I deliberately know that we did that may have resulted in that growth? So one of the areas that I continually over the past few years have wanted to stress is I constantly hear we're worried about our higher achievers and that we're not moving students from 4 to 5, when in actuality, if you look at our test scores over a period of time, that is actually one of our greatest areas of strength. The number of students that we have moved to a level 5. The number of students across our school that are scoring at the very highest level. And that's not, the other thing we always look at is we look for a baseline. So if more kids across the state were also scoring at a level 5, that might say to us either instruction has improved across the state or scoring's got a little bit easier across the state. But the number of level 5s across the state has not gone up. So we know that that is a statistically significant number for us as a district, and that's true both in language arts and in math. And as Dr. Ansel mentioned, I am very pleased with our special ed scores. It is something that we have really looked at. It was an area of concern last year, specifically in math. The cohort last year we were the most concerned about was 4th grade special ed in math, and if you look this year, they have made marked growth. And one of the things that I had commented on was that I had a theory that the more we emphasized a balanced literacy approach, which includes a reading workshop where students are given choice of text, that we would see our male scores go up over time. If you make a 3rd grade boy typically read Sarah Plainenthal, they are not going to be engaged. You will not grow as a reader if you are not engaged. Add choice to your reading curriculum, and you will engage students more. I am probably most pleased in the lunchroom at how many kids actually bring a book to lunch. We have boys, especially, who love fantasy. They have fallen in love with it. And when I give a tour of this building, one of the things that I always say is, we are a district that honors books. We put money into our library, and we make sure that our students have access to whatever it is that is going to engage them, because that is the only way you grow as a reader. And I believe that our male growth in reading is attributed to that. Can you move that slide to the next one, Dr. Ansel, please? So where are we going and what are we doing? So we still are concerned about 2 things in particular when we look at our data. It's not level 1 and 2. We're actually doing an okay job with our students who are seriously struggling. We're moving them along. We're doing okay with our 4s and 5s. It's that group in the middle. And part of the reason we changed our master schedule to go from 1 focus period to 2 win periods was to ensure that we were targeting instruction in both math and language arts. So students now, instead of having 1 focus period a day, where if they're struggling, they have to pick whether they're going to get extra help in math or language arts, now in grades 1 through 4, and 5's a little bit different, they have a dedicated win time in language arts and a dedicated win time in math. So what do they need to move each one of them as a learner, as a mathematician? What do they need to move each one of them as a learner in language arts? Those periods are where we target that small group instruction. So if you think about the professional development we're doing right now with guided math, that is completely focused on targeting what each student needs to move along. That's how you move 3s. Because the truth is, when you have a student in the 3, it could be 1 question in probability that if you did 1 small group of instruction in that targeted area, because you realize that was a weakness for that child, you can move that child along. And as you also know, the other areas we're really working on is making sure that all students are getting what they need, including special education and general education, through expanding our school year program and also focusing on a co-teaching model in the classroom. And I think I've got everything that's up there, so I'm going to pass that back to Dr. Ansel.
So, are there any questions about any of this? I know that you like to see the Bergen Eye data, and we've been watching for it. And as soon as it is available to us, then we can bring that back for you.
I'd just like to commend the teachers and administration on this. The report was wonderful. I also was really happy to see the progress. There's a lot of things to be excited about in this, so congratulations. The special ed information was one of the things that was a real highlight. I think there were lots of highlights in here. I would continue to have us focus on that approaching section. Like looking at the 6th grade maths, having 25% of our students still just approaching standards is a concern. Keeping those approaching numbers lower and moving those folks to meeting and exceeding would be great. You can tell there's been so much progress on this, and it's nice that we're actually looking at numbers like, oh, look, we have 50% of our fourth grade math folks that are meeting expectations, and now we can start thinking about how do we move them to exceeding. So kudos to you guys. Wonderful job.
Can I ask a question?
Over here, though.
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry, Dr.
Sergeant.
Ansel. So this is great. As both a board member and a parent, I'm really happy with the results that I'm seeing thus far. I'm just curious in terms of what we're doing with Open Circle and the social emotional learning, if we're also working with the students about test taking and test anxiety, or if any of that is being dealt with, or how that's being handled.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think the important thing to remember is, I try not to say the word test around here. There are districts that overemphasize testing like no one's business. The first year of Park, we did a co-presentation with River Edge, and there were parents screaming because they felt that that's all their children did all day. So what I will say is Open Circle focuses on anxiety and what do you do when you're stressed? Because some students may be anxious when they sit down to take a test. Other students may be anxious when they're in PE and have to do the shuttle run. So it gives them strategies for what do I do in a stressful situation that before we take any kind of test, we might bring out and talk about again, but it doesn't specifically talk about what are we going to do in a test-taking situation.
That's perfect. I like that approach better, even better. Thank you.
I guess, Dr. Ansel, I too am very pleased, but my question here is that the schedule for the what I need, the win period, who determines, is it test scores that determine what that individual child needs, or is it the child? How is that generated?
Well, I think there's multiple things that dictate that. It would never only be test scores, but we do numerous types of formative assessments all the time that help us to determine how kids are doing throughout the course of lessons and units. I know that our students also just recently finished doing a lot of goal setting that were discussed at the goal setting conferences. So teachers are looking at the progress kids are making on those goals.
Okay. So that I get, and I understand all that, but like when they're in a class, does this WIN group go together because it's based on all these different things, or?
I'm not sure.
I guess who determines in the 2 periods what the student is going to do?
Well, I'll let Ms. Bozios talk about it more.
Okay, so when the win period happens, it's not just I get win period because I need basic skills. It's what do I need during that time? So I'm a learner in the general ed setting, and I don't actually need basic skills, but when I get to the unit on comparing fractions, I need extra help. So my teacher, and what we're really trying to do is not pull out our basic skills students as much, but actually put the basic skills teacher in the classroom, is taking this group of students to work on comparing fractions, and this group over here might be doing something else, and this group over here, who might be high flyers, might be on IXL at that time extending their curriculum. So think of it not as a static, this is what happens every day during win period, but more, what do I need right now in this moment of time? Because we know that the biggest thing that we never want to happen is basic skills to become a life sentence. You put in basic skills in first grade, you stay there for the rest of your life. No, it's what do I need right now? Because I might be a struggling math student until I get to geometry. And all of a sudden, I take a geometry pre-assessment, I don't need any extra help in this period, I need extension. So if you think about it at that time, and that's why it was so important to build it into our schedule both as a math time and a language arts time, and to consistently have that support during that time.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question. First of all, let me say, I want to provide context here. I feel these grades or these assessments are very positive. I think our teachers have been doing a good job. These numbers are really good. But, you know, there's always room for improvement, and even good numbers have negative trends. So in ELA, grade 5, there's been some
Can you say
going
what
for-
page you're on? I'm sorry.
If you look at page 3,
Oh, thank you.
grade 5,
Okay, thank you.
back in 16, 17, they had 92% meeting and exceeding, and it's slipped to 85. These are good numbers, but it's 3 years of downward trend. And if you look at page 5, and if you look down the columns, if you look down the rows to grade level 5, and you look across the columns, you can see that there is, you know, overall level 4 and 5, there's a -3, or is that a 3% reduction? Excuse me, it's not a -3, it's just a 3% reduction in the growth. When you look over further to the right, you see a 1.1% increase at the state level. So it's not just only declining, it's contradicting what everyone else is doing. So just keep that in mind. That's ELA for 5th grade. Getting to math. In math, this is, I think what concerns me is that the numbers aren't as high. You know, we're struggling with 66, 68%. I'm on page 11 for meeting and exceeding. So there's not as many students that are excelling in math. The trend is okay. If you go to, actually, it really isn't. If you go to page 15, this is looking at the same students as they go from grade level to grade level 3 through 5. You'll see that grade level 6, they kind of dropped a little bit. So from there, my questions is just simply, you know, what are we doing to make our numbers better? I know it's a broad question, and you know, I know not all these numbers are bad, but some could use improvements, and others are trending in the opposite direction where we want to see them. So, you know, what action steps do we have, you know, to focus on possibly correcting those?
So I think, you know, under intervention strategies on that last page, I think that addresses some of those areas. Those are some of the strategies that we've been doing. Like when we redid the assessments for language arts, I think that the guided math training, the extra training in math workshop are ways that we can help improve their overall skills, which would then translate to helping them do better on their tests.
Okay.
Dorothy? Yeah, so the other thing I wanted to put out, I appreciate you bringing these things to the attention, but I also, especially on the grade 5, I'm on page 2, everyone, the ELA achievement. Grade 5, 2018, 2019, one thing that I would just like to commend everyone with, if you just look at the exceeding, 44% of that group is exceeding. This is the same one that you were concerned about, Mr. Darian, moving from 92% to 88% to 85%. But if you look at any of the comparison of the math or ELA, this group, if any of them, we have more people exceeding than anything else we have in the school. I mean, there's 46 in grade 4, but it's a very high group. The problem, as it appears to me, is you've got a 2% and a 5% change that happened in not meeting and partially meeting. And with 111 students, it ends up being a few students. You know, before we spend a lot of time going, okay, well, what do we do differently? I think we should at least commend folks on moving the needle significantly on that exceeding. It went from 28% to 34% to 44%. And I think that's what we're wanting to do with our students.
Can you tell me what I'll look at the next time they take this test? With the 80% and the 90%, what are these numbers, what will these numbers be? We have a district goal.
Right.
And how will the district goal look? When I look at these numbers, I have this year's,
Right.
the 18-19. I have your report.
Right.
What will 19-20 look like? What numbers?
Well, my hope is that we're going to hit those targets. I think they were, we deliberately made them a challenging reach, but, you know, I like to try to be cautiously optimistic that I think we're moving in the right direction. So.
Okay.
I have another question.
So the numbers will be 80% of the number or 90% of the number?
Well, I'm hoping, yeah.
Okay.
I have another question. How accurate has Linkit been to actually predicting what we were going to be, and how useful has it been to identify kids along the route to actually get them to move forward? I mean, I've seen progress, so.
I can give you a partial answer. Ms. Bozios probably could tell you a lot more from what has been relayed to me. It's been generally pretty accurate. But do you want to add anything more to that?
I think it's always important to remember that Linkit, they can't overpromise. So the one thing about Linkit is they underrepresent the number of students that will pass. And so sometimes that is an issue because, you know, if we want that to be a valuable tool, correct? But we say to a teacher, listen, we're really concerned about them, and they're going to go, listen, that kid's going to pass because I know that kids at that level pass all the time. What Linkit really does for us more than for this district predicting passing, because Linkit also does something else. On the state scores, we only have 5 levels, right? Linkit has 6. And so that makes it a little bit harder sometimes in the middle where we're most concerned. However, what Linkit does for us is helps us to identify where's the student struggling, because that's what I need to target during the win period. So I think that's what Linkit's better for. It's for mining the data and actually also the data locker part of it, because remember, we keep other data in Linkit as well. And just one other piece, because I was up here and I was hoping I was going to get up here again. I think the really important thing to remember, Mr. Darian, when you're looking at data over time, is to remember the baseline. And we can't, as much as we never want to compare to the state, we can't ignore the state data. So when you're looking at those grades over time, across the state, 51% of students pass math in 4th grade, 47 in 5th grade, and 41 in 6th grade. So it's a much more difficult test, so our growth may not be as high. Now, I tried, I went back to see if I could come up with the score that would, the data should show a common pattern, right? So if 3rd's here, and this is how many kids that pass, and 4th is here, and 5th is here, and 6th is here, and we match that, well, the Bergen County I should match that too. So I was trying to see if I could figure out what's the cohort, what's that number need to be. I won't know until if I was right, whether or not when the Bergen County data comes in, but that's really important, especially with 6th grade this year, because our scores went up, the state scores went down. So actually, I think we made more growth than it shows there.
Mrs. Walker?
Just one last question. So with the change in our 6th grade grouping and scheduling, and it seems it's such a positive thing that we've implemented, I guess we can hopefully look, and we can never guarantee, that we will even improve more on our test scores from last year's 6th grade to this year's 6th grade.
I think one way to look at it is that we know that the new curriculum is definitely making a difference in other ways. And I think that it's reasonable to predict that it's going to help us in the SLA, but more importantly to me, I think it's moving our kids forward in math. And so I think that that's going to have a positive benefit when they do their testing.
Just thank you to all the teachers and administration. I think we have scores here that we can be so very proud of. And again, reiterating to what Ms. Bozio said, that you look at the state, and I know we don't want to just be compared to the state, we rather be to the cohorts or the districts within our area, but I really think we are doing a great, great job. Not to say we'll sit and rest on our laurels, but sometimes if we concentrate too much on just a couple of those negatives, it becomes a defeating attitude that we don't want to have happen. So I say kudos to all those involved in doing this testing in the trenches. It ain't easy. Thank you.
One question I have, and this is, you may have an answer now, or you may want to look back at it, but in the third grade, the ELA, that group on page 2, one thing that strikes me is, so great to see the percentage of meeting exceeding going up. Again, congratulations, awesome to see that trend. What is a concern is that the exceeding numbers are not as high as what our exceeding numbers is in other places. 63% of meeting, that's what I would say sounds great. We have dipped down on exceeding from 20% to 15 to 12. And I just was wondering if there's going to be any interventions specific for third grade ELA, if that's something you guys are going to work towards. You don't have to have an answer now, but maybe it's something to look at.
Sure. And as you said, I would like to look into that a little further, and we could talk about it a little more later.
Okay.
Jeremy, just to say that in the third grade, and I wonder, as we're talking and looking into that, that's the first time they're looking at the test.
Yes.
So then I also wonder, we have that 1 year that's a little bit higher, but it also could just be getting acclimated or not being and not necessarily knowledge-based, but that's just something to also...
That may be, and again, looking at trends on what the rest of the districts are like, maybe that's the way it is for this test. I think it's just worth exploring a bit more.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay, back to you. Anything else for your report?
No, that's it.
That's it? Okay, business administrator report.
Thank you, Mrs. President. The business office has been busy with various state reports, such as the application for state school aid and the district report of transported resident students, better known as the ASSA and the DRTRS respectively. We are also wrapping up our 18-19 audit, which hopefully will have our last on-site visit sometime next week by our auditors. And we hope to have the audit uploaded to the state website sometime in December. And finally, next Tuesday is Election Day, so just a reminder for everyone to go out and vote. And that concludes my report.
And I'm sorry, could I just add one thing for the benefit of anybody who happens to be watching this on video? I will post the presentation on our website so that it can be checked at a later time.
Okay, moving to minutes, we have review of September 25th and October 16th. Any changes, email Mr. Marmora. I forgot to tell you about someone who came late and left early from our closed session, so I'll email you that. And that issue that you and I were talking about, it's actually fine. It's fixed on the next one, yeah. All right, committee reports, administrative items. Mr. Darian, would you like to take A?
Yes. I'd like to move A1.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
Did we get a copy of that?
It was the self-assessment that Mrs. Bozios went over last time.
Okay,
That's what we're
all
talking
right, so
about.
I watched that. Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Any other questions? Call the question.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes.
Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Millian?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Leslie? Mr. Darian?
Yes.
President Nichols?
Yes. Mrs. Levy, do you want a copy of it?
I watched it because I was out, but if I could get an actual copy,
Can you get a copy?
but just for my records, that would be great. Thank you.
Buildings and Grounds, Mr. Darian.
Yes, I have nothing new to report at the subcommittee level, and with that, I'd like to move B1.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Walsh. Any questions?
I have a few if no one else has questions.
Go ahead.
No? Okay. Item number 4, All the World Stage, Category D, January through June. Just curious, improv class, that's being held after school, is this? Okay, and this is an outside group, right? This is not a, so they're the ones who are raising the funds to pay for the fees and all of that? Okay, just making sure. Thank you. Yep, that's all I have.
Last meeting, we had pulled the OEA dance-a-thon. Are we going to be adding that before January, I guess?
I requested some paperwork that I didn't get yet.
Okay. Do we know if All the World's stage is having a performance?
No.
They're not?
I specifically
They're not?
asked that.
Okay.
She said that their performances are at another location.
Okay, good. Any other questions? Call the question?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Levy? Yes. Mrs. Noreen?
Yes.
Mrs. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Wesley? Mr. Darian?
Yes.
President Nichols?
Yes, curriculum, Mrs. Norian?
Yes, I'd like to, am I moving approval on those? Since I
Yes.
don't have my little spots on C1?
Yes.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Yeah, we just need some motion and second line on the agenda. Any questions? Call the question?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Noreen?
Yes.
Ms. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Wesley? Yes. Mr. Darian?
Yes.
President Nichols?
Yes, finance, Mrs. Shapiro?
Okay, so Finance met this evening before this meeting, but I don't really have anything to report. Mr. Marmora did a great job summarizing. They've been very busy catching up in the business office. Before I make the motion, I wanted to take a moment to highlight D7 PTA and the generous grant for Mr. Joe Ryan, who does an outstanding presentation for 5th grade. So we want to thank them for that. And this evening, I would like to make a motion to approve items D1 through D7.
I'll second.
Second by Dr. Westlake. Any questions? Call the question?
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Noreen?
Yes.
Ms. Shapiro?
Yes, and abstain to D7, not because I don't like Joe Ryan, but I'm on that PTA committee.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Wesley? Mr. Darian?
Yes.
President Nichols?
Yes. Mr. Walsh, delegate report?
I don't have a delegate's report, but the delegate assembly is coming up on the 23rd. And
Of
hopefully-
November?
Yes. Hopefully, we have a meeting in between so I think there's one resolution. I don't have it, I don't have the book yet.
Where is the meeting, by the way? How much do you need mileage for the next agenda? Up to 50?
Yeah, usually, yes, up to,
Can you add Mr. Walsh to our next agenda? So you can get the resolution for us that you'll be voting on?
yes. When is the next meeting?
When is our next board meeting? The 13th or 14th, something like that, yeah.
13th.
Mid-month, somewhere in there, yeah, 13th maybe. All right, personnel, Mrs. Walker?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to present F1 and F2.
Second by Dr. Westlake. Any questions? Call the question.
Mr. Griffin?
Yes?
Mrs. Levy?
Yes.
Mrs. Norian?
Yes.
Ms. Shapiro?
Yes.
Mrs. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Dr. Westlake? Mr. Darian?
Yes.
President Nichols?
Yes, policy, Mrs. Levy?
Yes, thank you. We had a policy committee meeting yesterday. We will, on the next agenda, at the next meeting, be able to approve all of the updates to our policy manual that were made, so that we will be moving that next meeting. We also worked on updating, again, the medication forms that we discussed. We have some minor edits that Dr. Ansell's going to get to us. And we also reviewed the memorials, dedications, and donations, and we're working on a draft for that. So nothing other than that for this meeting.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mr. Griffin?
Yes. We met earlier this week on Monday, went over some new procedures and timelines for our newsletter that will show up in the minutes for you guys. Made adjustments to the brochure that we're working on. It's being finalized in the committee. We're very close. You'll see it soon. We also discussed climate survey, that deeper discussion on approachable and responsive. We did not come to a conclusion on that. There were some additional talk of potentially a follow-up survey to learn more. And then there was also the suggestion as a group that we all did agree to, whether it's tonight or not, is to have a deeper discussion as the board about, one, what is approachable and responsive, and two, is that something as a board that we would shoot for or not? The other discussions that came up were the awards that we had mentioned last time. We're going to, didn't have enough time to go into it, but that conversation of maybe having awards that we do to highlight people for curiosity, courage, and character. There will be a formal write-up that we'll do on that. It's not complete yet, but as a committee, we did think that that was something worth pursuing. And regionalization, no real update in our committee, but I did go to School Boards Association and learn from their legislative update that that's not likely to move in this next session. So it may be less of an issue, still something we'd want to pursue to at least get a seat at the table. There may be some options.
Thank you. Mrs. Walker?
If I could just piggyback on what Jeremy had said, I too attended that legislative discussion. And what I extrapolated from that was that they were considering it only for districts that wanted to embrace regionalization. So that was an interesting way of, my spin on the whole thing is that it's a rather political move at this point, and we won't even get into it. So when you start to hear things like this, that only districts that want to embrace it will they begin to work with and maybe help finance it, is what I'm getting at. So from what I gathered, and perhaps you too, Jeremy, this is not in the near future at all.
I mean, you never know until something's, actually passed. And, most of the stuff has been through those news articles that sometimes sensationalize stuff a bit. So who knows? I think we should still watch it. It didn't sound like those legislators thought it had much legs, very many. No.
Tri-District, Dr. Westlake? Okay, open to the public?
Oh boy, not a soul.
Old business, new business? How was the convention?
Good.
It was good.
Yeah?
They had some nice classes. I have a booklet for you. I handed it to the people that didn't get there. That shows what the classes were, teachers, some of the vendors. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I would say to that with the booklet, if you have a moment, it's free to download the app. And then on the app on the agenda, if they had any handouts, they automatically have the handouts that you can automatically save and do that. So I want to say thank you for the opportunity to go. It was very educational for me and informative. It was great to meet and see what other boards are doing and how other schools handle things. In terms of a procedural, if I could ask that, is if there is something that maybe we learned about or wanted to explore the possibility of doing, is it best to come and approach you as the president, or to sort of bounce ideas off, or how that would work?
Is it controversial?
I don't believe it to be.
That's not a no.
No, I don't think it's controversial. I know that I don't want to put anybody under the bus or anything. I spoke to Mrs. Walker and Mr. Griffin about it. There was an opportunity to, a local school district nearby did a presentation. They have their sixth graders run a Board of Education meeting. It really, as someone who's involved in politics and the political process, I'm always interested in getting younger kids engaged. They find that like engagement goes up not only with the students, but also because the parents sort of go through it with the students, and then they get to learn more about what the board does. There's also a possibility of expanding it to council as well if they were interested. My thought was maybe to meet with the local school district that does it and get a little bit more information, and maybe draft a proposal that I could bring to the board if it was.
Yeah, does anyone have an objection to that? Does River Edge do that?
Yeah, they do.
I've seen that online, yeah. I think they sit next to the board member, or are they up there by themselves? I've seen it both ways, I think.
Board members, I believe, sit behind.
Behind them.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they had like videos that interviewed the students and stuff, and they seemed really excited. And it's interesting too because, as you may or may not know, the president of River Edge is a college student that grew up in town, and his big thing was he didn't get picked when he was in sixth grade for this particular program, and I think he still brings that up as a little bit of upset about it. But anyway, it's really interesting, and now he's the board president.
I think he's made up for it.
Yeah, I think so too. Anyway, it was just one of the programs that I was excited about, so I was going to get some more information and do a proposal.
Do you want to do that, or do you want Dr. Ansel to get the info? What's easier for you?
I'm happy to do it, if that's okay and appropriate. Okay, perfect, thank you.
If I could just, when you said the political aspects of it, no, I think if we look at it more as the democratic aspect of the process.
I'm sorry, the democratic process, you're in fact correct.
Political kind of gets people like that.
100%, the democratic process
Got
is good. I like that better too.
Any other old business?
Yeah, I'd like to just, a couple comments on the workshop. I went this year. I thought the classes were very good. You know, some years they kind of get, shallow, like, Google in the classroom and things like that. It wasn't very difficult to sit there, and you're like 5 minutes into it, you start looking at the clock. But this year it was very good. I learned a lot, and they had classes that I was complaining about that they didn't have, and it was well worth it. It was well worth going down there. I read about, just to chime in with what Rita, you said about the regionalization, the state is funny how they do things, right? So, like for instance, they used to hand out ROD grants for certain things. Now, they don't do that anymore. Regular operating district is ROD grants. Now they don't do that. What they do is they'll help pay for the debt. So they'll pay 40% of the debt. So, it's just a sleight of hand. They are helping, but, instead of giving you the money, they'll help you pay it off. And then there's a couple caveats to that. So they'll say, well, you have to qualify first. So if you want to upgrade your gym, you won't qualify. But if you want to upgrade classrooms, space, that'll qualify. And then at the very last minute, depending on the annual budget, they may pull back and say, well, 40% was our intent, we're actually going to pay you, 37% towards your debt. But that's how the state operates. And in terms of regionalization, now what they're doing is we'll help pay for studies. We want to move to a county-based system, and we know that it may not work everywhere in the state, but if you're interested, we'll give you X amount of dollars. And what they've done is they've allocated a chunk of money based on geography towards district-level regionalization. And then if you don't want to do that, like here in Bergen County, that would be way too big. So if you're interested in a smaller, but also regionalization, we also have funds for that. So in a way, the idea is not coming from us, it's coming from you. And if it passes, well, that's because you wanted it. So, it's a typical...
Dance.
Yeah. So anyway, I learned that down at the school board. So, and I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
I would just like to add one more thing, and that kind of takes it away from, but there was a little confusion on our
Accommodations.
Accommodations.
Yes, or lack thereof.
And I really would like to thank our business administrator for stepping up and 2 weeks into the job, getting everybody placed so that we were not out sleeping with Burt Parks in the park. But thank you very much for everything you did to make us comfortable.
My pleasure.
Just to piggyback on what Mr. Darian was saying, yes, there is funding for, studies related to regionalization. That money, if we were interested in it, I know we're thinking about doing a population study. Depending on how we frame what we're doing in a population study and who we partnered with, some of that could be covered by that. It would be a potential, something to consider. The other thing that is expected to be coming down the pipe is additional special education funding over the next few years. It looks like the state is actively trying to increase that. I'm sure that our administration is familiar with that and they can give you more details. I'm just giving you a broad stroke of what I heard. I'm sure there's some other initiatives that I would like to talk about, but I guess one of the things I would like to thank is the PTA for their amazing thing with the candidates. First of all the folks sitting up here that went to the candidates night, excellent job sharing why you're running. I thought it was a wonderfully run event. Thank you for the PTA to do it. Also thank you to Joe Blundo for being up there giving why he was running too. I thought it was a well-run event.
Just two quick questions. One's a request for the board office that maybe we could have a list of the names of the new board members and their role, like who's doing what now.
What are you looking for?
The board of, not board members, the board office members, not us.
Okay.
We have those. But those that are working downstairs.
You want the, we should have the names of the, what they're doing.
What they're doing, their positions. If we could have that, that would be helpful. So we know who to contact directly, maybe a little bit of a who to see for what. Absolutely. And the second thing, and this is, I guess for the public's knowledge, is the flags, if anyone's looking for them, the pedestrian crossing flags have been pulled. Rotary and DPW. I was running around Kindercomack today pulling the flags until after Halloween. And then they will be put back in the bins on Friday. So just in case anyone...
Don't trust Cabbage Night?
We don't want to say that. We're just being overly protective of our flags.
Yes. We don't want to replace them all.
Any other
Yes.
old or new business?
Yes.
Mr. Darian?
To our video viewers, we are on our school website. We're on YouTube, so give us a like. Click subscribe. It takes nothing to watch us on TV. So, and everything is there. So, thank you.
Anybody else?
To that end, is there a way, don't laugh, why?
I don't know.
Is there a way to maybe, I know we've not finalized our social media procedure or policy, but to maybe get it out there a little bit more that this was our test results and that this is the video that has the test results, because I feel like that stuff that people are always asking about?
Dr. Ansel said he's going to add it on.
Yes, but like, just, is there a way, can we,
I think that is a good idea. I think that,
I'm actually going to be posting something on Facebook next week after the election. I will add it to it.
okay, that's a great idea.
Just remind me.
oh, I have one other thing. You know, we are, you know, Board of Trustees, and we have our, you know, perspective and what we focus on. And then the administrative staff, who's looking at me right now, for those who can't see that in the field of vision, you know, they have their perspective and their communications. And I was wondering, you know, why does it have to be so separate? I think that the school, in particular, the principal's office, does a fantastic job with the OPS Facebook page and also with the Wednesday's notices. I don't know why we can't piggyback and have a little Board of Ed section every once in a while instead of having to double communicate. I don't know, what's your thoughts on that?
What do you mean by a section? There's not a section on a Facebook page. I mean, like,
Well, I mean, I was thinking of the Wednesday notices, there may be a Board of Ed section down at the bottom. But in terms of the Facebook page, you may, you know, post something every once in a while about what the board is doing and what they want to communicate. We can use that as a
Well,
method to exchange. Why do we have to be so separate?
I wouldn't be the one to answer it, but I will say one thing I've been impressed with is now on the school calendar, the Board of Ed meetings, when you click on the website, it shows up what it is. And not only does it show up what it is, that there's a Board of Ed meeting on that school calendar that everyone's printing out, it actually says what the topic is going to be. Like if there's a presentation, that's showing up on there. And that's a new thing that we just started. So I was really glad to see that. So I think there is possibility of improving that. I don't know where all the lines are, though.
So if that was it showed up this month, that this was going to be the testing results, and it really
Look at the results of this.
So maybe,
It'd make a huge
maybe
difference.
it's working in the negative.
But that
Well,
requires,
remember what tonight is, though. So there.
Cabbage night?
It is cabbage night, and there are parents who are making sure that their children are at home. So you don't know what keeps them home.
And ultimately, I will say also, that addition to the calendar wasn't made until later in the month. So if someone is on an adamant, like, the first of the month, I'm going to print off the whole calendar, they probably didn't get it. So this is something we're moving forward. We don't know how it's going to work, but I think it's a good move forward.
I was just checking the app, and I was just, I noticed when it says this week, when it had the BOE meeting, it doesn't have the topic. And I know some people check the app, and that's probably something in the PR committee that we didn't even think about. So we, that thing, and then I was just looking at the app, and I don't know if we're able to update the app or how hard or difficult it is. But I noticed that easy, you could press the button and go to the Oradell PTA, there's a tab for it. And I just wonder if we could have a tab directly to our website from the app. I don't know if that's something we want to do or how difficult that is.
I would recommend that you guys talk about this at subcommittee and make
Sure.
best practices. I mean, I could tell you that, yeah, I'm very lazy and I have a lot of things going on, so I don't have an app for the school. I'm sorry, I got too many apps on my phone as it is. And I have a lot of apps that I don't even use that made it to my phone. And in terms of going to a website and clicking on an agenda, on a calendar, I never do that, and I'm a board member. So, you know, for me, I'm lazy, and I like my news feed in Facebook, and when it pops up in my news feed, I read it, and it's fantastic. And it's the same thing with the YouTube notifications. I click on a couple of interested YouTubers, and I get that bell notification in my email. And it's a very passive way for me to see what's going on, and I don't miss a beat. I'm just thinking that, you know, maybe you guys might want to consider something like that, and instead of coming out with a separate news feed from the Oradell Board of Ed, it would be just from OPS.
That's a great idea. You know, one of the things that happened that I saw at New Jersey School Boards Association that would be a good way of considering it, how the district there actually includes public on their committee meetings. Not only, all of their committee meetings are posted in advance, so the public can come at any point unless it's like a negotiation or something that they can't come to. There are certain things like that. But they give 3 board seats, like we do, and 3 public seats for it. In this sense of doing a better job of PR and then also potentially handling this climate survey thing and being approachable and all that, one thing that I think would be interesting for us to consider is either for a partial time test or for something with the PR committee allowing public members to come to provide feedback that we could better address these things.
No, not yet.
Good try.
Go ahead.
I hear you. I think that's a good idea. I think that, though, experience, I have a couple of concerns. You know, we as board members are trained to behave in a way that we're doing what's best for the community, for everyone in the community. I think if a community member, you know, without that training, you know, may bring a personal bias or a specific agenda, you know, because why else would you want to join a subcommittee member meeting at a board? And what I would feel is that that may sway the outcome of that subcommittee, you know, because you have 2 or 3 members that have a specific point of view. So it's just dangerous. You know, inviting at the subcommittee level, not to be confused with the board level. I mean, at this level, when we're making decisions, I think we should be very open, transparent, and discuss all aspects of every decision out in front of the public. I think they are entitled to see it. I'm happy that we're video recording it. I'm happy that it's on YouTube. But at the subcommittee, sometimes it gets sticky, and sometimes it's not so clean. And I think that, I don't know, I'd just be very careful if we're inviting outside people in. I mean, for a special, you know, a task force, that's different. Surveys are different too, because they're more general in their approach. You get a good representation, right? We start asking numbers about, you know, what's the population sample size and so on and so forth, and how many respondents. And so, anyway, I think I said enough. Just, you have to be careful.
Any other old or new business? Not yet. I need a motion to go into closed session for both legal and personnel issues.
Move we go into closed session.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Norian at 8:42. No action will be taken.